Hey everyone, Richard Payne from Keller Williams Select Realty and of course Halifax Homes Lifestyles. So you know those times when you're walking around the neighbourhood or you've been following a property and you know it was active and then it goes pending and you're like, yay, it's gone pending, or no, it went pending, and then it becomes active again and you're sat there thinking, wow, really, what happened? You know, sometimes it's the sign on the front of the house that changes, sometimes it's the status online. Well, here's some reasons as to why that can happen, and sometimes it's not actually such a bad thing that you might be thinking. So, we've all seen it happen and we've all wondered why. Why does a house who's been for sale goes pending, which means somebody had an accepted offer on it, and then during a number of days, obviously the buyer is doing their due diligence, and the next thing you know, the house is back up and showing active again. And the question always is like, what's wrong with the house? What happened? Well, here's some of the things that can actually happen. Maybe it's seller's remorse. Pretty unlikely, like if you're selling your house, you're selling your house. So it's pretty unlikely it's going to be that. But during the conditional phase for a buyer, there is buyer due diligence. And one of the biggest things on there, of course, is the home inspection. So maybe one of the questions that we should be asking is, well, okay, what happened during that home inspection that the buyer and the seller couldn't actually agree on? Because don't forget, it's not just about what the buyer finds, it's what the seller will then accept as well. So for instance, you do the house inspection and you find maybe there's some mold, maybe there's a wet basement, maybe there's an electrical problem, roofing, there's a whole myriad of things that could potentially be wrong. So the buyer would obviously write up an amendment, send it back to the seller, and maybe they asked for way too much money off the price of the house. Maybe they asked for a whole load of items that should be fixed. That, some of the items on there are debatable, regular wear and tear. You're not buying a brand new home here maybe. So maybe some of those items are just natural wear and tear, and it's a little bit unreasonable to get the seller to fix everything. Now, yes, needs a brand new roof, needs new windows, crack in the foundation. You can imagine those things are like, yeah, you got to get those things fixed because they are now a known problem. So maybe that's one of the things that they couldn't come to an agreement on. Not necessarily that everything's wrong, but maybe, just maybe, the buyer was a little bit too aggressive in what they were asking for, and the seller said, I'm not fixing all that. Maybe they asked for a huge price reduction off the price of the house. Again, you've got to fix a crack in the foundation. Maybe you had a quote, it's $800, and you go back asking for $5,000 off the price of the house. Again, potentially that's a little bit unrealistic, and not really in the spirit of what we're trying to do here and actually buy the house. So that's another item that could potentially make it come back on the market. So don't worry that, there's all matter of hell has broken loose in the house and there's something wrong with the house. Maybe just that the seller and the buyer couldn't agree on what had to be done and the price of what had to be done. Now, the second thing, of course, is on the financing side. Those are the two really big conditions, unless you're dealing with wells and septics. So the two big conditions, the second one, financing. Maybe the bank decided, do you know what, feel a little bit not so much confident on the price of the house, let's get an appraisal. So they go to the appraisal comes in and the appraisal comes in low. Well, there's a few options there. The bank will only give you the lending on the appraised value or the purchase price of the house, whichever is the lower, not the higher, the lower. So if you have a low appraisal, what can happen then is that the bank says, okay, great, you need to make up the shortfall in that value of the down payment. So if you're buying a house for $200,000, the appraisal comes in at $190,000, the bank will lend you on the $190,000, somebody needs to come up with the $10,000. So that's one particular problem that could happen. Another choice, appraisal comes in low, order a new appraisal. That's one of the options. Maybe it's a different appraiser, maybe it comes in better, maybe it doesn't, don't really know until that actually happens, but again, more cost again for the actual seller, for the buyer to actually pay for that one. So you got more cost. Maybe the buyer wasn't qualified to actually buy this house. Yes, the agent should have done a good job at pre-qualifying, but do you know what? Maybe when they got into it, they decided that the price was going to be okay. They went and fell in love with the house and they overstretched themselves, and the bank says, no, we're not going to lend on that property anymore. So that's another way that it can fail. And then there's two or three other ones that can basically come into the same bucket as low value on the house that can cause it to fail. So don't always think that just because a house was active and then comes pending and then comes back active again, that it's actually what's wrong with the house. Maybe there wasn't something wrong with the house. Maybe, just maybe, there was something wrong with the buyer. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to give us a shout, richard@richardpayne.ca, or you can phone me or text on 902-489-1804, and check out richardpayne.ca for all of the blogs and tips and everything else, as well as home house search in the Halifax area.